A man fell out of a helicopter over a jungle in Borneo. Nobody went looking for him for 4 days. And the company he worked for, a company worth $6 billion, pretended it didn't happen. His name was Michael de Guzman. And he knew something that was about to destroy everything. Because what he knew is one of the most jaw-dropping financial frauds ever pulled off. And the craziest part? Everybody had the chance to stop it. Nobody did. Let's go back to 1989. Calgary, Canada. David Walsh is 40 years old and completely out of options. 2 failed mining ventures, maxed credit cards, borrowing money from his own mother. This is the man who is about to create the largest gold fraud in history. He finds a geologist named John Felderhoff, Dutch guy, decades of jungle experience. I'm absolutely convinced there's something massive buried under a stretch of Borneo called Busong. Walsh scrapes together $80,000. They stake a claim, and then the samples come back. 2 million ounces of gold, then 6 million, then 30 million, then, and I need you to actually sit with this number, 200 million ounces. At 1996 gold prices, that's a deposit purportedly worth $70 billion. The biggest gold discovery in human history, they claimed. Bigger than anything in South Africa. Bigger than anything in the Americas. The stock price goes from 27 cents, around 1993 when serious promotion began, to 280 Canadian dollars. That's a 100,000% return. A $1,000 investment becomes $1 million, on paper. Lehman Brothers is in, JP Morgan is in, Fidelity is in. The Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, the retirement savings of hundreds of thousands of teachers, puts in $100 million. Felderhoff wins Prospector of the Year, the industry's highest honor. Standing ovation. Nobody's asking questions. But here's the thing I need to plant in your head right now. And we're coming back to this. Not a single gram of that gold had been independently verified. Not one. Before we get into how it fell apart, you need to understand something. This wasn't a backroom scam with fake paperwork. This passed audits, multiple audits, from credible independent firms. How? De Guzman's team pulled core samples from the drill site. Standard procedure. But before those samples went to the lab, his crew crushed them. He mixed in gold sourced from nearby rivers and ground down jewelry and repackaged them. Weeks of work. Thousands of samples. Over 4 years. The auditors tested the samples they received. The samples passed. Of course they passed. Here's the thing that makes geologists physically uncomfortable when you bring this up even today. If you look at those salted samples under a microscope, you can see the difference. River gold has round edges, worn smooth by water erosion. Deep rock gold has sharp, jagged fracture lines. They don't look the same. Nobody looked. And I know exactly what you're thinking right now. Why not? These are professional geologists. This is their job. Hold that question. I'm going to answer it. But first you need to understand the 3 things that made this whole system collapse in on itself. 3 reasons. 3 structural failures. None of them are about stupidity. Reason 1. The market was punishing doubt in real time. At least 3 credible people raised red flags between 1994 and 1997. A mining analyst named Egizio Bianchini flagged data irregularities. He was quietly reassigned. A small newsletter called the Gold Mining Stock Report published a skeptical piece. They got sued. When the stock is going up every single week, questioning it isn't brave analysis. It's a career-ending bet against the crowd. Doubt had a price. Belief had a reward. Reason 2. The site was designed to be inaccessible. Busong isn't a quick flight from Jakarta. Deep jungle. Getting there unannounced required political permission from Suharto's government. The same government that had a direct financial interest in Bre-X succeeding. Distance isn't accidental in fraud. Distance is the product. Reason 3. Everyone assumed someone upstream had already checked. JP Morgan assumed the Toronto Stock Exchange had done the work. The TSX assumed the independent auditors had done the work. The auditors assumed Bre-X's sample prep was clean. Nobody owned the full verification chain. Every institution added legitimacy without adding verification. This is what I call credibility laundering. By the time you're the 10th credible institution attached to something, the due diligence feels finished. It almost never is. Now, remember that open question? Why didn't the professionals look closer? That's your answer. Looking closer cost money, risked relationships, and disrupted a story everyone was getting rich from. A market that punishes doubt isn't a market. It's a cult with a ticker symbol. By late 1996, Bre-X has a new problem. President Suharto's son wants a piece of Busang. In Suharto's Indonesia, this isn't a request. It's a condition of survival. Walsh needs a major mining partner. Someone with enough political weight in Jakarta to make this go away. 3 giants start circling. Barrick Gold, Placer Dome, Freeport McMoran. Barrick moves first and hardest. They bring in Brian Mulroney, the former Canadian Prime Minister, who sits on their advisory board and starts lobbying Jakarta directly. Their offer, 67% of Busang. Now Walsh keeps 22. The Suharto family gets the rest. Walsh calls it extortion. He holds out. Eventually, Freeport wins. They take 15%, but critically, they become the operator. They're the ones who'll actually build the mine. They need to understand the deposit well enough to design infrastructure, hire crews, place equipment. Freeport's geological team arrives at Busang in January 1997, not to audit, to prepare for construction. Their geologists start pulling samples from the same site. The numbers don't match. The gold isn't where it should be. The distribution is completely wrong. Gold in nature doesn't spread evenly across a massive deposit like this. It clusters. It concentrates. What they're seeing looks like something manually distributed. Freeport quietly commissions an emergency reassay, and the results come back in March 1997. And then, 4 days before those results go public, Michael de Guzman boards a helicopter over Borneo and doesn't arrive at the other end. His body is found 4 days later on the jungle floor. Partially decomposed, several fingers missing. Official verdict, suicide. He jumped. Maybe. Here's something nobody mentions when they tell this story. De Guzman had 4 wives in 4 different countries who had absolutely no idea about each other. The same man who fabricated a $70 billion gold deposit had also constructed 4 entirely separate lives. And none of the people in those lives suspected a thing. May 3rd, 1997. Freeport releases a statement. Their due diligence found insignificant amounts of gold at Busang. They are suspending their involvement. The stock doesn't fall. It doesn't decline. It ceases to exist. In one single day, May 6th, 1997, Bre-X loses 80% of its value. By end of the week, trading is suspended. The stock never opens again. $6 billion gone. Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, 100 million Canadian dollars gone. The Caisse de dépôt, managing Quebec's public retirement savings, 70 million gone. 40,000 individual investors, people who did exactly what they were supposed to do. They relied on professionals, on institutions, on the architecture of trust that modern finance is built on. Gone. Strathcona Mineral Services, one of the most respected independent mining firms in the world, is brought in for a final assessment. Well, their verdict, strong possibility of systematic and deliberate salting of core samples over a period of years. Systematic, deliberate, years. Now, what happened to the people responsible? Felderhoff fled to the Cayman Islands, faced insider trading charges in Canada for selling more than 80 million Canadian dollars of Bre-X stock in the months before the collapse. 8-year legal battle, acquitted. Walsh died of a brain aneurysm in the Bahamas in 1998, cleared of all charges. De Guzman, the man who almost certainly engineered the entire fraud, was dead before the investigation formally began. Every single person who should have faced justice either died, fled, or walked free. That's the real ending. Here's where I want to slow down. Because if this story is just some mining guys ran a scam in the 90s, you're missing the whole thing. Lesson 1. Credibility is not verification. Every institution that touched Bre-X added legitimacy without adding verification. Each one assumed someone upstream had done the hard work. Nobody had. This is not unique to Bre-X. It shows up in every major bubble. Tech stocks, real estate, crypto. The more credible names attached to something, the less any single one of them feels responsible for actually checking. Credibility is not verification. It's just someone else's assumption wearing a suit. Lesson 2. Distance is the product. Busang was inaccessible. That was not an accident. Every great fraud puts something irresistible just far enough away that checking feels more inconvenient than trusting. Now today, it's not a jungle in Borneo. It's a server room you're not allowed to audit. A financial product complex enough that questioning it makes you look unsophisticated. A pitch deck where the key numbers are proprietary. Every fraud needs a jungle. Find the jungle before you write the check. Lesson 3. The system didn't fail. It worked exactly as designed. The auditors were paid by Bre-X. The analysts worked for banks that owned the stock. The regulators were politically dependent on the same government that wanted Busang to succeed. Nobody was incentivized to find the fraud. Everybody was incentivized to validate the story. Bre-X didn't beat the system. The system handed it a trophy. March 19, 1997. The helicopter lands. De Guzman is not on it. The company issues a statement expressing condolences. The stock barely moves, because nobody has connected the dots yet. The 40,000 people who lost their savings didn't do something reckless. They did exactly what you're supposed to do in a functioning financial system. They relied on professionals, on institutions, on every trusted name that stood up and said, "This is real," and every single one of those institutions failed them. Enthusiastically, repeatedly, sometimes profitably. Bre-X didn't succeed because the fraud was brilliant. It succeeded because every institution with the power to stop it had a financial reason not to look too hard. The gold was never in the ground at Busang, but there was something else being mined throughout this whole story. It's something that produced $6 billion before it ran out. The trust of ordinary people. That was the real deposit. The question isn't whether something like Bre-X could happen today. The question is, right now, what's the thing everyone credible has signed off on that nobody is actually allowed to look directly at?